Russians are threatening retaliation after the historic SBU operation, while panic and confusion grow inside Russia. Donald Trump expressed surprise, claiming it may complicate his potential role as a peace mediator. We discuss this week's events with journalist Dmytro Gordon. Dmitry, hello. Good evening to you and all our viewers. Let's begin with reports of Russian planes approaching the Bering Strait, moving closer to the US. Russian media is calling for revenge. This week, the SBU carried out a brilliant operation called Spiderweb. How do you assess Russia's reaction and response? We all realize that this special operation by the SBU changed not only the course of the war, but also the future, both similar and completely different wars. It changed the balance of power and the very concept of war. It turned out that the Soviet Union, malnourished and denying itself the basics, built incredibly expensive airplanes costing $100 to $300 million by today's standards, and simple drones for $600 destroyed them to garbage. What does that tell you? It tells us that the old methods of warfare no longer work. Modern warfare is won by skill, not numbers. So what if they have 140 million people? How are they going to keep their planes, ships, subs, and other military installations safe?
Население 140 миллионов. Ну и что? Как они уберегут свои самолеты? Как они уберегут свои корабли? Как они уберегут свои прочие военные там подлодки, я не знаю.
How? What are they going to do? Lay down on the tires that were under those planes? There's no way. And there is another unique aspect that I'm sure Putin thinks about every day and every night, waking up in a clammy cold sweat. Here he is going somewhere, for example from Ogorodovo to the Kremlin or vice versa. The route is known, manholes are welded shut, there are no people on the streets, cars are dispersed, the motorcade is traveling at breakneck speed. Everything has long been worked out. We know who lives in the houses along the road, who rents apartments, no one on the balconies. But where is the guarantee that a window in one of the apartments will not open and drones will not fly from it towards the motorcade? There is no such guarantee. This means that the concept of security has ceased to exist. Or he should sit in a bunker forever. But that's not why he stole billions, tens and hundreds of billions of dollars from his duped, drugged population. He also wants to live because he has not lived until the end, because his position for the last 25 years did not allow him the life he really dreamed of.
Это говорит о том, что понятие безопасности закончилось. Ее не существует. Ну или он должен сидеть в бункере все время. Но не для этого он крал миллиарды, десятки, сотни миллиардов долларов у своего обдолбанного тупого населения, чтобы сидеть в бункере. Ему пожить тоже хочется. Он же как бы и не жил еще. Потому что все равно на галерах, все равно его должность в течение последних 25 лет подразумевала жизнь не такую, как ему хотелось бы.
People close to him have repeatedly told me that he envies his associates, especially the oligarchs, who can live as they wish. And he was indeed on the galleys and still is. The richest man in the world, it would seem. 25 years of systematic stealing, accumulated untold wealth, tons of money, live and be happy. But he is not allowed to relax, that's how he perceives it. He, of course, wants to travel or at least move quietly around his residences. But how can he now feel safe even there? If airplanes that Russia is no longer able to produce were parked somewhere in Siberia and were destroyed literally from a truck, that changes the very idea of war. It turns everything upside down. This is a powerful message for the Americans, for the Chinese, for everyone. Today, Americans are learning from this war. They are learning from the Ukrainians. I will not name names, but the most advanced Ukrainian specialists in drones and other systems have periodically met with the former director of the CIA, who personally visited them and invited them to the United States.
Американцы сегодня учатся на этой войне. Учатся у украинцев. Я не буду называть фамилии, но наиболее продвинутые наши специалисты и по дронам, и по прочим системам, они периодически встречались, вот я знаю, с бывшим директором ЦРУ, который здесь с ними встречался и пригласил их в Америку.
In America, they lectured about how Ukraine, with less population, fewer resources, less armaments, successfully resisted the fascist horde. This is real art. What the security service of Ukraine under the leadership of General Malyuk has done is fantastic. I have already said more than once, this will be written about in textbooks not only in history and not only in Ukrainian textbooks, but also in textbooks on military affairs, military strategy and skill. This is, in fact, a modern-day battle of Kursk or Stalingrad, a moment that turned the tide, as it once did in World War II. Putin realized that he was vulnerable, that all of Russia's boasted power is attainable, vulnerable, and it doesn't matter with what tricks. Trucks drive around Russia, there are millions of them. The country is geographically huge, though not great. And now the FSB and other law enforcers are checking these trucks because they realize that one of them may contain something. Why not? Of course there is. It may not be in the truck, but in something else. And not drones, but some other device. They sowed this wind, an aggressive, destructive wind, by starting the whole thing in 2014.
Может быть, не в фурах, а может быть еще в чем-то, а может не дроны, а другие устройства. То есть они посеяли ветер, агрессивные, посеяли ветер в 2014 году.
They got the storm, they sowed it. As they say, you reap what you sow, and now they have reaped. But this is just the beginning because Putin now has a serious dilemma. He disappeared for 3 days and now has to explain to his people how Ukraine destroyed a third of its strategic bombers. He must strike a retaliatory blow. But how will Trump react to this? Trump is already openly threatening Putin. Today, meeting with a voter, he said it directly. What should be done in such a situation? What kind of blow can be struck? Nuclear weapons are excluded. This is a fiction, an empty threat. The Nutcracker is nothing more than a myth. Iskanders are already flying, drones are flying, missiles too. Everything is already in use. So what can he come up with new?
Ядерное оружие исключается. Орешник — это фикция, это балда. Искандеры, они и так в нас летят. Кабы и так в нас летят, и дроны, и ракеты, ну все летит.
Dmitry, let's stop at this point. Why is a nuclear strike ruled out? Why exclude hazelnut? Because that is what they are threatening now, in fact, nothing else. Let's start with Nuttall. I believe, this is my personal opinion, that there is no such thing as hazelnut. From what I've been told, the gist of it is this. Putin was told about an old Soviet development called Kedr, a missile. But since Putin is no longer a boy or even a man in the full sense of the word, but a man in a state of approaching marasmus, he's soon to be 73, plus 25 years of constant stress, which breaks anyone, no matter how old they are. He simply forgot the word Kedr while talking about the allegedly existing retaliatory weapon. The word hazel associatively popped up in his mind, and he voiced it. There really is no such system. But once the national leader said it, everybody stood at attention, and now they have hazel. They have even launched it along the Dnieper, along Yuzhmash. The problem is that this Oreshnik is not capable of carrying a nuclear charge. It is simply too heavy. So they launched a dummy. Well, it flew. Well, it burned down some barn or shed. Who knows? And then what happened? There was a lot of noise. They said, "We've got Nuttall," and then the talk died down, if you noticed. Nothing at all. Not a word, because it was a bluff. Putin is bluffing, and it must be understood. In the KGB school and in the Andropov Institute, they were taught to bluff professionally, so he is bluffing. I don't believe in hazel, frankly. Now about nuclear weapons. I can't imagine that he would dare to throw them at Ukraine. And we're not talking about strategic nuclear weapons, but tactical nuclear weapons. And I don't believe he will use them for a number of reasons. The US, UK, France, and China, all nuclear powers, have already made it clear this will not be tolerated because it will unbalance the entire world order. If nuclear weapons are used against Ukraine, where is the guarantee that tomorrow India and Pakistan, also nuclear-armed states, will not start exchanging strikes? Where is this guarantee? Tomorrow someone will say, Ukraine voluntarily gave up its third-largest nuclear arsenal in exchange for the Budapest Memorandum, a document that turned out to be a sham, and nuclear weapons were used against it. Then other countries will think, well, we have nuclear weapons, and we officially declare it.
Вот это Украина отдала и против нее применили. Так, у нас есть ядерное оружие, мы объявляем об этом.
And now we too will start throwing things at anyone. Pakistan and India will say so, and then Taiwan will pull up. It will be a complete unbalancing of the world order. This is the first reason why the use of nuclear weapons is impossible. The second reason is that the US and NATO countries have excellent surveillance and tracking systems. In fact, they have the whole world at their fingertips. Let me put it this way. If you go to a restaurant and start looking at the menu, you can see from space what dishes you are choosing and at what price. You can see everything. All the military installations, all the logistics, all the routes and approaches have been known for a long time. We are not naive. We understand it. In order to use tactical nuclear weapons, serious preparations are required. And the Americans and Europeans know perfectly well where and what is stored. As soon as even the slightest preparations begin, God forbid of course, these facilities will be destroyed by tomahawks and other weapons with such force that it will be too much to bear. Besides, after that we can forget about all good things. Only bad and very bad things will remain. And then there will be an open physical hunt for Putin, and it will become a reality. This is why I categorically do not believe in the use of nuclear weapons, nor do I believe in Nutshell. He can intimidate as usual, but this intimidation works against him. Does he think that if he destroyed the Kherson regional administration, he won't destroy the Belgorod or Kursk ones tomorrow? I would not count on it. We have something to answer for, and not only in Belgorod and Kursk. Moreover, we have something that they don't even suspect, but it's not my prerogative to disclose it. The president will say it when he deems it necessary. We have a lot of opportunities. I would advise the hotheads in Russia not to invent new ways to strike Ukraine. They need to go to peace talks and make a fair agreement. They are already on the plus side, and if they refuse while remaining on the plus side, they will end up at a catastrophic disadvantage.
Очень много чего. Я бы поостерег горячие головы в России изобретать способы нанести какое-то поражение Украине. Они должны идти на мирные переговоры и заключать мирное соглашение о справедливом мире. Они и так в плюсе. А если они тупо не захотят заключать мирное соглашение, будучи и так в плюсе, они останутся в минусе. Этим закончится. В крупном минусе, в катастрофическом минусе.
Well, this is, what we've already talked about. In fact, Russia is supposedly going to the third round of negotiations and is ready for them, although at the same time it calls Ukraine a terrorist state. We understand that Putin is in a difficult situation right now. He doesn't know what answer he should give, first of all, to the Russians who are hearing all the time about nuclear ash, Oreshnik, and so on. But as you say, none of that is really there. The only way out for Russia right now is peace talks. But it seems strange to me. On the one hand, they talk about retaliatory strikes, accuse Ukraine of terrorist acts, and on the other hand, they go to negotiate. These are two incompatible things, in my opinion. What does this look like for Russians?
Вот это вот две несопоставимые вещи, как по мне. Но для россиян это как выглядит?
And it's very simple. There's work going on Trump. They're being told, look, we're for peace talks. Why? To show Trump, we are for peace, we want to negotiate, we come, you see, and we do everything diligently. But in reality, what do they want to negotiate about? Only about exchanges, prisoners and bodies of the dead, which of course are important, extremely important. But nothing important goes further than that. Because this Solovyov directly states, we don't need a ceasefire, we don't need peace, we need victory. And this idiot Medvedev, out of his mind, directly tweeted that it's not about a truce, it's about victory, about continuing the war and winning, for which Senator Lindsey Graham, the author of the package of sanctions against Russia, simply thanked him from the bottom of his heart. Everyone knows in the world that Medvedev is what Putin can't say. He voices for him. And at the same time, Medvedev is not some Solovyov, but a man who was head of the presidential administration, then president, then prime minister, for many years in power. So he simply proclaimed this message that Russians don't need peace, Russians need victory over Ukraine.
Все это знают. Причем Медведев это же не какой-то там Соловьев, это же человек, который был главой администрации президента, потом президентом, потом премьер-министром, долгие годы у власти. То есть он этот месседж, он просто продекларировал этот месседж о том, что русским не нужен мир, русским нужна победа над Украиной.
This is called peace enforcement. When Medvedev was president of Russia in 2008, during the attack on Georgia, I was told by Mikhail Saakashvili that he called Medvedev and Putin picked up the phone from Medvedev's phone. Now they will say, by military means. Yes, by military means. To force peace. That's all. What to talk about, what negotiations, what to talk about. They must be started. The Russian world, Russia must simply end. Then Medvedev said that Russia is carrying out an operation to force Georgia to peace. Now the whole world has to force Russia to peace. The peace enforcement operation is done by strikes on the Russian military machine so that the Russians scratch their heads and realize the economy and the military machine are overhyped or worse. There is no point in going to war any further. When they realize that continuing the war is dangerous for the existence of Russia as a state, then they will go to peace talks and everything will be fine.
Вот когда они поймут, что воевать дальше нет смысла, это опасно для существования России как государства, вот тогда сразу они пойдут на мирные переговоры, и все будет хорошо.
You mentioned Lindsey Graham. It's quite an honor for Medvedev to be reposted by him. But Trump remains cautious about U.S. sanctions. He keeps saying it's too early, he hasn't seen enough, and while he expects Russia to strike Ukraine, he also claims to see signs of peace from Moscow. That raises questions about Trump, but let's focus on sanctions. If the U.S. adopts the package proposed by Graham and Blumenthal, already backed by senators, and if Europe enacts its 18th sanctions package with a $45 oil price cap, will that destroy the Russian economy?
И если Европа введет 18-й пакет санкций, где там уже установлен потолок на нефть, на Urals $45 за баррель.
You know, I have no questions for Trump. I have said many times, and I will say it again. You should not believe the words that Trump says. He says a lot of words, and they are different and contradictory. You have to believe deeds, actions, and results. So Trump is playing a big geopolitical game. Trump is doing well. In fact, I'm sure everything will be fine. Look, today he declares, I'm for Ukraine. Do I believe that? No. I don't believe Trump's words anymore, after his repeated back and forth. I don't believe the words, but I do believe the deeds. Now let's look at deeds. Russian oil is falling. Oil in general, and Russian oil in particular. The Russian economy is a nightmare. 100% nightmare. They are hiding a lot. But I can see from independent sources and my own insights that they have big problems, not smoothly accumulating, but rolling one after another. There is not much time left before the economy collapses. They have put the economy on a war footing, which is understandable, as the Soviet Union did in the 41st year, when it evacuated factories, when the Americans and the British gave a lot in Lend-Lease.
Знаете, уже кубарем катящиеся одна за другой. И времени не так много нужно для того, чтобы там был коллапс экономики. Они же перевели, смотрите, экономику на военные рельсы. Это понятно. Так сделал Советский Союз в 1941 году, когда эвакуировал заводы, когда американцы, добрые американцы и британцы по ленд-лизу очень много дали. Очень много.
The decisive contribution was made by the Americans and the British. At that time, the USSR deployed powerful defense factories in the Urals and Siberia, put underage children and women to the machines, and through fuck you, through stump work, through AVOs, party tickets, and depressions achieved that the Soviet Union began to produce a huge number of weapons. Now let's look at today's situation. They cannot build new factories. They don't have enough for that. We must realize that this is a completely non-technological country that cannot even produce matches and nails. We have to realize that. This country does not produce anything, I emphasize, nothing, neither on its own, nor without Western spare parts, components, nor without Western machines and equipment. It is simply impossible. They cannot produce anything. I watched a report yesterday. A new Lada is standing in a salon, all rusted out, on the honest word of honor, terribly welded on bolts with some plastic instead of metal. It's a nightmare. They are unable to do anything, and there is no need to turn a blind eye to this, by the way.
Стоит в салоне, вся уже ржавая, на честном слове, на болтах, приварена жутко, какие-то вместо металла пластмасса. Это кошмар. Они не в состоянии ни черта сделать, и не нужно, кстати, закрывать на это глаза.
They are extremely low-tech. They have launched military production, they work in 3 shifts, but they are unable to cover the shortage of tanks. They have already taken everything from the Koreans, Africans, the Soviets, reopened warehouses. They had a lot of tanks, but everything is beaten up. There are objective figures. They can produce about 200 tanks a month, and we destroy more than 400 of their tanks a month. The remaining 200 in a few months, there will be nothing left of the Soviet stockpile. There is practically no armored vehicles. They are not able to fill this vacuum. Do you think they accidentally carry provisions on donkeys and ride mopeds, scooters, and motorcycles? It's not from a good life. No army allows itself such luxury. In addition, there is a big problem with the personnel. Before, dumb assholes with mortgages took huge sums of money, offered $38,000 for a contract, and now the number of dead is so high that even those who went for easy money think, fuck it, probably.
Огромные деньги им предлагали, елки-палки, 38 тысяч долларов за контракт только. То что теперь? Количество гробов настолько заполонило пространство России, что даже те, кто шли за легкими якобы деньгами, подумали, да ну его, наверное, нафиг.
I'd rather live here with a wooden toilet and pay my mortgage than buy a one-way ticket to zero. Now the Russians, for one thing, have lowered their contract prices. Here's a recent example from Bashkortostan, Ufa. The contract used to cost 1,600,000 rubles, but now they have already reduced it to 1,200,000. Why did they lower it? There is not enough money, the blow to the economy is huge, and the sanctions are still having their effect. The Chinese, no matter how hard they try to provide insurance, do not help much. Kazakhstan is helping, Georgia is helping, Armenia is helping. Everything is understandable, but globally nothing works, especially considering that 1 million, not the worst Russians, left Russia at the beginning of the war and are still leaving. More than 1 million were not counted because of the war, dead and wounded. Today, the deficit in Russia is 2,600,000 workers and engineering personnel. There is no personnel. There is no one to work as janitors, street sweepers, couriers, laborers, welders. Roselmash, Russia's largest agricultural enterprise and the flagship of combine harvester production, is closed.
Некому дворниками работать, некому мести улицы, некому курьерами работать, некому рабочими работать, сварщиками. Россельмаш, крупнейшее предприятие аграрное России, флагман вообще производства комбайнов, закрыт.
It has recently closed down because there are no orders from the agrarians. There is devastation all around. What is happening to the construction industry is a nightmare in general. The key rate has been kept at 21% for a long time, and there will be no good news. They have already put their hand into the National Welfare Fund and picked up almost everything from there. The pension fund has also been picked up. It is virtually non-existent. Soon they will start freezing the deposits of depositors, i.e., people who put money on their books and cards will not be given anything. This money will be used for the needs of the motherland. After all, it is not their own, but stolen. All this shows that the situation with the economy is extremely bad. The trend is not just deterioration, but sharp deterioration. Against this background, oil prices are falling, and the budget has a huge shortfall. If the sanctions that will be imposed now, and they will be imposed 100% of the time, and they will definitely work, it will be a serious blow. We're talking about Trump, Lindsey Graham, Democrat Blumenthal. It's clear they're anti-Russia and pro-Ukraine, but they have collegiality and discipline. They're Republicans, and their leader is Trump. Is it conceivable that Lindsey Graham has an election coming up?
У них есть коллегиальность, у них есть дисциплина, это республиканцы, и лидер их Трамп. Скажите, можно себе представить, вот у Линдси Грэма скоро выборы.
He desperately needs Trump's support. He's going to the Senate again. For Lindsey Graham, it's important for Trump to point the finger at his sponsor for helping in the election. Can Lindsey Graham not put Trump on notice about the bill? Excluded. Can he team up with the Democrats without the consent of Trump and the U.S. ruling establishment to win the support of 81 senators out of 100? Also ruled out. Can other Republicans join those 81 and support the bill without Trump's consent? No, also ruled out. Note the number. 81. If Trump doesn't like something, the president can always veto it, but only if the number of votes is less than 2/3. At 81 out of 100, it's a jackpot, and Trump can't even veto it. That's serious leverage in his hands. Of course, he's telling Putin, look, you're playing around, I'm nice to you, but this is America. Look at what the Democrats are saying, what the Senate is saying, what Congress is saying, what Mike Johnson is saying.